Hello there. I am Danielle Siembieda. I am the Creative Director for Leonardo. I want to thank you for joining with me today. I also would like to acknowledge the land that I am calling in from. I am calling in from the unceded Ohlone Hermitage territory, otherwise known as Oakland, California. And I want to thank the people who have provided this environment for me, the team for the Science Media Lab, CYFEST13, Chaos and Cosmos. I am very honored to be able to present to you today around the topic of how collision and impact come together to create a transdisciplinary world for art, science, and technology. So thank you very much for joining me, and please feel free to connect with me during and after the presentation. Thank you. I'd like to start by framing organization which I'm representing today, Leonardo. So Leonardo fosters transformation at the nexus of art, science, and technology because complex systems require creative solutions. We serve to empower an inclusive global network of borderless community where we all belong in the pursuit of a more vibrant, just, and generative world. We also are known as the International Society for Art, Sciences, and Technology. With an emphasis on international, we are in over 130 countries around the world, and we are a network of networks. You are part of our network. Thank you for joining me today. So we live in a very difficult time in our world. Where I come from, we have over 1 million acres of land destroyed by fires. Fires that were a result of the climate crisis created in a combination of fossil fuels, carbon emissions, and other catastrophic events that have created loss of cities and towns, ecological environments, and pollution that has now spread across the United States and into the oceans. The climate crisis that is near you, whether that be in St. Petersburg or in London or in Dakar or anywhere else in the world, has no boundaries. It has no borders of where it can go and where it will go. This last couple of years, we have experienced a viral pandemic that has spread like the wildfires of California. We have seen pandemics and epidemics happen throughout the history of mankind. Many of these environments, many of these endemic elements of injustice, climate debt, wars created by the climate crisis can be preventable or can be resolved, but it's going to take all of us to do that. So how are we going to address these unprecedented challenges? How can we possibly imagine what comes next? How can we possibly see how to navigate it forward? The way that Leonardo has approached this is looking at how do we center impact at that middle, and how do we actually look at some of the things that are challenging us today. And what we have designed is something called a full cycle creative engine. What that means is that when we're looking at complexity, we're looking at these difficult problems around the world, we have to approach them in a way that is not linear, that allows for people to engage in multiple ways and on-ramp and open into those doors, come into this particular engine to start to address the issues of complexity. So this includes things like publications and media and podcasts and social media, exhibitions and experiences and immersive environments, getting together through symposium and festivals and convenings, learning, creating those pipelines for education, to creating time and space in residencies, and also with in research? How do we actually position the particular topics that we want to address? And most importantly, how do we build our network of communities that actually is able to look at those particular issues of complexity and come together? And that's really what I want to talk about today, is looking at that coming together and creating those situations and ways to look at impact and complexity. One way to look at impact is thinking about the concept of contact jazz. Now, when you have this jazz orchestra, when you have people coming in that are both physical and instrumental and compositional, you have to come into this group, this collective, really by leaving your ego at the door, like by getting rid of the id, that you are going to become one with this group, with this synergy. But there are already organic and natural rigid boundaries that are built into the space that then create a bit of friction, that allow for that transition, that translation to occur. So think about impact as a way of removing the ego to be part of the collective, to be part of the collaborative, to be able to move into an environment where you can generate something new, something magical. That impact is the result of that particular contact with others, that understanding of where others are coming from, what they can contribute, and then to look at what they can contribute and how do you add to that contribution. So if you think about contact jazz as multiple people with trombones and with saxophones and with other jazz instruments, think about that also as if you're coming into contact jazz with somebody who is a philosopher, somebody who is a social worker, somebody who is a factory worker, somebody who is a artist, a designer, coming into that space, and you learn and understand how they can contribute. And what you do is you put away your understanding of the world to where you are allowing yourself to absorb their knowledge and absorb their ability and talents and connect those into yours. And that removing of that ego and that ability to play and integrate amongst others is so similar to how jazz orchestras conduct and connect within each other. It's improvisational at times, it's difficult at times, it can be messy at times, but that impact, the thing that comes out of it is so powerful and so impactful that it can really open a door and a question and a method that had not been there before. And so thinking about how we define impact, looking at the beautiful way that musicians have connected with each other is a way to absorb and connect within that impact. And I want to start with that framing because I do think that part of looking at some of these really difficult situations that we're facing, these questions that we want to answer, is about how do we dance? How do we choreograph around that with the different types of people and institutions and nation states and groups that we really want to engage to make that happen. Now, on the other side, not necessarily in opposition, but sort of in complement, is looking at how impact is about collision. Now, if you think about the universe, when we first started to learn about how all these different planets and galaxies and solar systems were created, the theory is around there was a big bang, a big collision, right? Inertia and physics and chemistry all coming together and exploding in a way that created something completely new, something that we had never seen before, something that had the formula to create life, to create bigger questions and bigger explorations and things that we still have not been able to even touch on. And this was billions and billions and billions of years ago. So the idea of impact as collision, that something new can be generated out of that impact, still holds true to this day. Now, something has happened this week, and that is the US organization NASA has sent a satellite into space to actually test out how impact and collision work. What would happen if we took the satellite specifically designed to create a collision in order to save the planet? So we're asking questions today about what do we have to do to solve some of the world's most wicked problems. Well, what are the wicked problems that we're also trying to solve is there is a reality that an asteroid could come to the Earth and create impact and contact, and the world would change. May not see that change as positive, but it could change with the same sort of concepts and configurations that happened during the Big Bang. So thinking about how these NASA scientists and designers and engineers and psychologists and anthropologists came together to start to think about these problems. When you look at the way that organizations, especially looking around the issues of space, we can look at a lot of the work that's coming through the Chaos and Cosmos Festival, that they're looking at some of these questions about what happens extraterrestrially, and then how do we look at where we are from the ground, from the earth, from the land that we're on, into the sky, that has helped us navigate for an entire time that humans have been around on this planet. And if you think about the beginning of mankind, the stars have helped us navigate. The collision has helped us regenerate. And understanding how that is today, looking at the technologies that are involved in this, looking at the questions that are being put forward, this is a very interesting way that we're starting to think about how do we actually address some of the other wicked problems. Is how do we actually then create collision to make sure we're saving the planet, that we're saving the planet, and who is it that needs to come into that space to make that happen? And I want you to think about that, to ponder that for a moment, and think about other circumstances and situations that you know of, whether that be in your own life or thinking about it out in the world and society, how there are moments of designed collision that are meant to create an impact that can either prevent or generate an idea, a hope, a humanity. Now, one person who really founded that particular vision was our founder, Frank Molina. He was both a kinetic artist and an astrophysicist. And in the early 20th century, he was in California, Southern California, at the University of Caltech. And he worked on a team to develop something that made it possible for us to send DART into space. Him and the team that he worked on with another astrophysicist named Jack Parsons was rocket fuel, the combustible chemical reaction that was really made to collide, to exert, to move up into the sky beyond the atmospheres, to begin the ability to look at space exploration. And thinking about this moment almost nearly 100 years ago, where I think it was around the 1930s when we first started to discover rocket fuel. What this was all about, this idea of like, there is this impossible question. What if we could go into space? This question of how can we do that, and who do we need to bring together to make that happen, or what are some of the implications of designing rocket fuel? What are some of those implications? And I think this is a really interesting question that Frank Molina and his team had posed and sought to design. Years later, after rocket fuel was developed and discovered and sent into space. Frank Molina was pushed out of the United States because of political reasons to Paris and into France, where he also opened an observatory. And while he was there, he really started to understand the real importance of transdisciplinary collaboration, of bringing together this orchestrated jazz ensemble of creators, of engineers, of mathematicians, of philosophers, to address some of the same questions that he started with Jack Parsons in the 1930s at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and at Caltech. And that's when he started the Leonardo Journal. And at the time, this was the written media was the way that people did communicate and collaborated and asked critical discourse at that time. And so that particular vision, that particular ability to see into the future and to think about what type of ways that we can connect contact jazz and collision to create that sort of impact still holds true to this day. And this is something that I encourage you to think about, is how do you participate in this dance of both contact jazz and collision. Now, one way to approach this as well is looking at how do we look at our values that we put forward in thinking about this, and how do we actually observe this. And I want to just share some of these values because I think they're a really good way for us to sort of set the stage for the conversation that we want to have, focusing on radical creativity and enabling situated discourse. By focusing on how we can actually really think of ourselves beyond the individual, beyond the id, into the collective, allows us to really have the particular discourse and position the questions that we need to ask. Innovation challenges that are driven requires the context of specific problem solving. So what are those questions? What are those innovation challenges, and who is at the table to set that and ask those questions? We also really want to think about how to include people whose voices have historically been underrepresented, and also really thinking about how do we ask those questions across languages. Fostering transdisciplinary collaborations across cultural, civic, research, and education institutions, thinking about the particular types of industries and markets and people that are involved in this process. It's not about setting up an engineering team. It's about thinking about the collective, who can come together, and how do we actually change particular systems, bringing in cultural institutions to work with industry and research and education. And how can we actually foster and bring together people, not just from one particular community, but allowing us to be porous and allowing us to be open to bringing in different points of views, and how do we absorb that? How do we create that absorptive capacity? How do we enable significant perspective shifts and new forms of creative problem solving by addressing the world's most complicated challenges? This is really important so that we're not just thinking about where we are in our own network and center, but we're also looking at how what we're thinking about has a cause and effect, has an impact on a community that we've never thought of or designed into the process. How do we bring them from the beginning? How do we begin to bring and create those questions, not just from within our own selves, but from those from outside our own networks? And that is, in addition, is how do you form new communities of networks and professional practices that encourage diversity and inclusiveness? And then how do you support innovative residency models and discourse and projects? Today is a time where we're in a moment of where extraordinary times are required for extraordinary vision. And I invite you to join myself and Leonardo to help create and design this future together. We can do this with fearless imagination. Leonardo's creative pioneers imagine what comes next and envision how to navigate ahead. It's time to harness the creativity to imagine our world. It's time to harness the power of art and science. It's time to harness the power of collaboration. It's time to harness the power of Leonardo. So what we are designing is a vision for the year 2028. And our goals for that vision are to transform systems, to amplify networks, and incubate ideas. I mentioned earlier this full cycle creative engine. So let's think again about how are we going to do this? I'm going to illustrate a couple different ways that we've approached this. I'm not going to touch on every single piece of this, but I do want to remind you of that impact, not just about like what is the qualitative and quantitative information we can come from this, but really about how do we create impact from this concept of collision and impact with jazz. Now, one example that we've started this year is a program called the Leonardo Kriptek Incubator. And this is around how we actually can put some of those values into action. We are applying this full cycle creative engine to 6 artists to begin with in our pilot season that will be based in California, that all are artists who identify as disabled, who are designing their own technology, who are innovating themselves. And how do we actually foster their ideas and create those ideas in a way that is supportive of disability access and citrus disability access, because disability technology and disability innovation is the story, is the history of technology. How do we center what they're doing in a way that provides residency, publication, presentation, community? How do we put that all together? So I invite you to join us along the way as we begin to design this, because the impact of this particular process of radical creativity and is also going to affect how we work together in the field of art and technology and how we center disability access at its core. So one example of that is we're starting with this particular platform with our Leonardo residencies. Our residency platform is designed to foster transdisciplinary collaboration across cultural, industry, and civic and education sectors. We have residencies all over the world. We also have a partnership with the Cylon Media Lab on residencies and many other institutions all around the world that allow for ideas to really move, to migrate, to connect with each other and to have that impact in that time and space. We also have multiple ways that we address media, and some of those primary ways are through publications, including our Leonardo Journal, which we have one issue that comes out every year in English and Russian, and our book series, our podcasts, our social media platforms, and we also will be launching an open access platform with MIT Press in the future that I welcome you to connect with. This is a way of getting that knowledge out and allowing for education and allowing for documentation of this process. The documentation piece is really critical to this process. And then how do we actually share those ideas? And so we have a global network of what we call laser hosts, our Leonardo Art Science Evening Rendezvous, which are ways that in your local community, you can build and connect with each other, and through osmosis of learning the ideas from engineers and from scientists and from philosophers and from others, that you will also be creating that particular environment to have that impact come towards you, and that collaboration can come out of that. And we do have some really incredible laser talks out of St. Petersburg, out of Brussels, out of Moscow, and so and all over the world. I really invite you to connect. Because of the pandemic, these have also been live and virtual, and so there's a great opportunity to be in that space. These are also platforms for our our Kriptek Incubator artists to be able to present their work and for you to be able to present your work. So I encourage you to connect with us and join us in this building of this community network. So one of the last slides I'm going to land on is how do you actually participate with us in some of these communities? And so this is an invitation for you to participate and to connect with us, to activate the Leosphere. You can see who is in our community through our network. You can attend one of our laser talks. You can join our affiliate program. We're on Discord and social media. So please do connect with us and connect with me. And I want to thank you and I want to thank the Cylon Media Lab team for helping create this environment where I can connect with you more, and you feel free to reach out to me. And let's collide together. Let's do this together. And I thank you very much. And thank you.